let's talk about fabric, or being more specific, garment fabric. So before we start sewing on our newly threaded machine and practicing on fabric, I want to go through how to make it a little bit easier for you, particularly if you are new to sewing. So there are many different types of fabric, and I'm going to start with the fabrics not to use, and how to identify them. So a difficult fabric would be something that's very light and sheer that you can see through, because this is very, very delicate. And if I go to an edge where it's been cut, can you see here how it can just fray very easily? And being a very, very delicate fabric, if this was made into a garment, it would have a very, very tiny roll hem. So it's very fiddly to work with and can easily get jammed under the machine if you're new and you're not sure how to sew it. So that's not a fabric that I would start with. Another fabric, moving on from the sheer flimsy light fabric, is stretchy jersey. So this is a fabric that stretches. Typically t-shirts are made out of this, and you get lots of leggings and sportswear, and it's a knit. So if you look at the edge, it's just lots of little loops put together. It's very spongy, and stretch fabric is a little bit different to sew, so that's something else that you would just need to just have a little bit of instruction to learn before you start sewing. The other type of fabric is you can get this quite thick textured fabric. So it could be texture with a cord, a velvet, a boucle. So it's when you can just see that the fabric has got lots of texture, and this one's got metallic in as well. So there's some slippy bits, there's some bumpy bits. So if you think back to the presser foot on the sewing machine that's flat, this is going to be moving over a bumpy surface. So this is not an ideal fabric to start with. So those are the three areas to stay away from when you've got a bumpy thick fabric. If you've got a knitted jersey stretch like a t-shirt material, or if you've got a very thin slippy sheer fabric. And if I relate those to garments, so here's sheer and it's knitted, that would be difficult to sew. This is sheer and it's got stretched ribbed cuffs. That would be tricky to sew because you can see all the seams, so they're specialist seams. And here's a complete metallic fabric where as soon as you put the needle in, there would be a hole or a run through the fabric. Now for fabrics that you can start sewing. So this is still quite a fine fabric, but it's not so slippy, and when you rub your hand across it, you can feel that it's not so slippy. And you can also do a little test, which I call the drape test. So if you hold about 8 centimetres of fabric out just on the fold and just let it drape, you can see here that there's a little U shape, and so it's got a little bit of stiffness to it, so it suggests it's got a tighter weave and it's not slippy. If I can compare that, you can see it's got a lot more drape to it and flimsiness, and you can see through. Here's another one. So this has got a print on, and as you can see, the print is paler on the back. That's a good suggestion that it's a bit stiffer to work with. And here, the drape test, if I hold out 8 to 10 centimetres, I've folded the fabric in half here and just seeing what happens here. I've got it's like a 45-degree angle. So anything, I guess 45 would be there. Anything between 30 and 60 hanging here is really good to sew. This would be something like a skirt, trousers maybe. Again, it hasn't got a slippy finish. It hasn't got any raised texture to it. And if I do the drape test where I'm just pinching in 8 to 10 centimetres and seeing what happens here, I've still got that bit of shape to it, and I can see it makes a nice curve here, so I know there's some structure to the fabric. And you can even go a bit thicker, so here's a wool, but again there's nothing slippy on it, there's nothing sheer, there's nothing raised. And if I do the little drape test, oh look at that one, that's quite a solid one there, so that would be, the more solid it is, it's more like the paper that we've stitched on, but we don't want to go too thick, that's the danger. We still need to make sure it is a fabric for clothes, not an upholstery fabric. So this is when we get a bit borderline. And look at the drape here, there really isn't any. So when I hold that out, this little V here, it stays just, and I'm just holding it there, it stays. So this is when you're sort of getting into territory that isn't really garment fabric, that's more upholstery. So let's stay with the typical garment fabrics, and I can relate these. So again, you might be altering or making a blouse, and these first two are very typical fabrics for tops. And again, with dresses, you may have a dress that needs altering, and again, if we do the drape test, we can see that there is a bit of structure in there. Even with the weight of the hem, we can see that it holds that enough shape. It's not a slippy surface, it's not completely sheer, it's not a stretch, so that'd be a great fabric to work on. And then you can just take a typical pair of trousers, and again this is of a very similar weight to this one we looked here. So do go through your wardrobe and have a look at typical garment fabrics, because that's what you're going to be sewing on the machine.